What if today you discovered the message that no one can ignore? In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal the secret that will forever transform the way you communicate with others. It's not just about words, it's about unlocking the secret code of instant attraction that Strauss has perfected over years. Imagine for a moment sending a message and knowing with absolute certainty that you'll get a response. Seems impossible, right? Most people live in constant uncertainty, sending messages into the void and waiting for replies that never come. But there's a science behind irresistible communication, and today I'm going to share it with you. It all begins with understanding the fundamental principle of perceived value and how to manipulate it in your favor. The first step to creating a message impossible to ignore is understanding the psychology of strategic disinterest. Strauss explains it perfectly. The paradox of human interest is that we chase what moves away and ignore what's readily available. Has it ever happened to you that when you show too much interest in someone, that person seems to pull away? And conversely, when you make yourself slightly inaccessible, suddenly everyone wants your attention. This principle works in every human interaction. Think about the last time someone ignored your message. You were probably too available, too predictable. You sent a message that didn't create tension, that didn't generate curiosity. When you write something like, "Hey, how are you?" you're giving away your power. You're showing that you're willing to wait, that you have nothing better to do. And here's the problem. What's always available loses value. To apply this to your life, you need a practical exercise. The next time you're about to send a message, before hitting send, ask yourself, does this message make me appear valuable or dispensable? If your message shows that you're anxiously waiting for a response, delete it. Rewrite it from a position of power. For example, instead of asking, "Would you like to go out with me this weekend?" write, "I have interesting plans this Saturday. You could be part of them." Notice the difference. You're not begging, you're offering. If you really want your messages to be irresistible, you need to subscribe now to receive more strategies like these. By activating the notification bell, you won't miss any of our persuasion secrets. And that's what we'll talk about in the next point, because the irresistible message requires not just the right words, but also perfect timing. The second crucial element to always getting responses is mastering timing and rhythm in communication. Strauss brilliantly summarized it. Timing isn't just when you send a message, but also how long it takes you to respond. Seduction masters understand that every message establishes a precedent, every response instates a pattern. Most people make the fatal mistake of responding immediately, showing they have nothing more important to do. When you respond instantly, 24/7, you're subtextually communicating, "I have no life. I'm waiting for your messages." Does someone like that seem attractive to you? Probably not. We want what's busy, what has value, what others also desire. Here's a practical example. Maria met John at a party. She found him interesting and gave him her number. The next day, Maria wrote him an enthusiastic long message. John immediately responded with another equally long message. They continued like this for days, with immediate responses. Soon, Maria lost interest. Why? Because John was too predictable, too available. There was no mystery, no challenge. Now, imagine the alternative scenario. John responds to the first message briefly but interestingly and waits a few hours. Then sometimes he responds quickly, other times he takes a day. Not to play games, but because he truly has a busy and passionate life. This creates an unpredictable pattern that maintains intrigue. Maria never knows exactly when John will respond, and that keeps her interest alive. To implement this, practice what I call the asymmetrical mirror rule. Observe how long the other person takes to respond to you, and then vary your response time. Sometimes respond a bit faster, other times a bit slower. Never fall into a predictable pattern. Repeat after me. My time is valuable, and I manage it with strategic intelligence. Can you feel how this simple change can completely transform the dynamics of your conversations? People start to wonder what you're doing, why you're not constantly checking your phone, and that curiosity is the most powerful hook there is. And that's what we'll talk about in the next point, because once you have strategic disinterest and perfect timing, You need content that creates psychological addiction. The third secret of the irresistible message lies in its specific emotional content. Neil Strauss revealed in his research that human beings don't respond to logic. We respond to emotions and narrative gaps. Most people send informational messages, but messages that always get responses are those that provoke an emotional reaction and leave something unfinished. Think about the last series you couldn't stop watching. What kept you hooked episode after episode? The famous cliffhangers, those unresolved situations that create tension that can only be resolved by watching the next episode. This same principle can be applied to your messages to make them irresistible. Here's the formula: emotion plus incomplete information. Guaranteed response. For example, instead of writing, "Do you want to know how my trip went?" write, "I just experienced something on this trip that made me immediately think of you, but I'm not sure if I should tell you." Do you feel the difference? The second message creates emotional tension and an informational gap that the human brain needs to complete. A real example: Carlos wanted to reconnect with Ana, a girl he had lost touch with. Instead of the typical "Hi, how have you been?" he wrote, "Ana, I just came across something that reminded me of our conversation about," reference to something specific they talked about. "It left me thinking about something important. Do you still have the same opinion on that?" This message worked because 1. It showed he remembered details of their conversations, emotional value. 2. It posed a specific question that required an answer. And 3. It created curiosity about what he had found and why it made him think of her. To practice this, do the following exercise. Take the last 5 messages you sent that didn't receive a response. Rewrite them, applying the formula of emotion plus incomplete information. You'll see how their power of attraction completely changes. A specific technique is using what I call partial revelation. Start telling something interesting, but strategically stop before reaching the climax. For example, "Today I discovered something about you that really surprised me. I would never have imagined it." The person won't be able to resist asking what you discovered. It's practically impossible to ignore such a message. Have you noticed how your mind is already creating more attractive messages? Share this video right now with someone who needs to improve their communication skills. You could be changing their life with this simple gesture. And that's what we'll talk about in the next point. Because once you master emotional content, you need to understand the science of psychological reciprocity. The fourth key element for making your messages irresistible is the strategic use of reciprocity and progressive investment. As Neil Strauss explains, people value more what they've invested time, energy, or vulnerability in. When you get someone to invest in the conversation, you've created a psychological bond that makes a continued response much more likely. Most people try to impress by showing all their value at once. They share their achievements, their most interesting stories, their best photos, all at the beginning. This approach is counterproductive because it leaves no room for curiosity and doesn't create a pattern of increasing mutual investment. Instead, you need to create an exchange where both gradually reveal information, like peeling layers of an onion one by one. Each layer they reveal increases intimacy and strengthens the bond, making it emotionally more difficult to stop responding. Let's look at a concrete example. Miguel wanted to deepen his connection with Laura. Instead of bombarding her with questions or just talking about himself, he applied the progressive investment technique. First, he shared a small personal observation. "I just realized that I always smile when I see your messages. It's curious how some people have that effect." This was slightly vulnerable but not excessive. Laura responded by also sharing something personal. Then, Miguel gradually increased the level of emotional depth, always taking a small step forward and creating space for Laura to do the same. To implement this strategy in your life, use what I call the calibrated vulnerability technique. Share something slightly vulnerable or personal, and then ask a question that invites the other person to share something at the same level. For example, "You know, I've always been quite reserved about my personal goals because I fear they won't be fulfilled, but this year I decided to change that. I'm working on personal goal. Is there something you're currently working on that excites you?" Practice this exercise. Identify 3 levels of personal revelation: light, medium, and deep. Create messages for each level and use them in sequence, never jumping more than one level at a time. Always remember to maintain balance. Reveal something, and then create space for the other person to reveal something similar. The key here is patience. Building authentic intimacy doesn't happen overnight. As the proverb says, soft water breaks hard stone. With each small emotional investment you achieve, you're creating a bond that's harder to ignore. Have you noticed how some people get you to tell them things that you normally don't share with anyone? That's this technique in action, and you can master it too. And that's what we'll talk about in the next point, because once you've created this bond of mutual investment, you need the final element, the variable reinforcement pattern that creates psychological addiction to your messages. The fifth and most powerful secret to making your messages impossible to ignore is the use of variable reinforcement and emotional polarization. Strauss perfectly synthesizes it. Predictability kills attraction. The human mind is designed to get hooked on unpredictable reward patterns. This principle, taken directly from behavioral psychology, is the same one that makes gambling and social networks addictive. Most people communicate in a completely predictable way. They are consistently pleasant, consistently available, consistently boring. But masters of persuasive communication understand that controlled unpredictability creates a state of constant anticipation that is irresistible to the human brain. Have you ever wondered why you can't stop thinking about someone who sometimes treats you wonderfully and other times seems distant? It's no coincidence. It's the power of variable reinforcement. When you don't know which version of that person you're going to get, your brain gets trapped in a cycle of anticipation and reward that becomes addictive. To apply this ethically and effectively, use what I call the emotional pendulum technique. Alternate between messages that create emotional closeness and messages that establish a certain distance or independence. For example, you can send a warm and personal message one day. "I just saw something that reminded me of that conversation we had. I loved how you explained your perspective." And then, on another occasion, be briefer and more focused. "I'll be busy these days with an important project. I'll tell you how it goes later." A concrete example. Sophia applied this technique with Javier, a guy she was interested in but who seemed somewhat distant. Instead of always being available, Sophia alternated between showing genuine interest and demonstrating that she had a fulfilling life regardless of him. One day she shared something personal and showed curiosity about Javier's life, and another day she briefly mentioned her exciting plans without inviting him. This created a pattern where Javier never knew exactly what to expect, which kept his interest alive. Over time, it was he who sought more interaction with Sophia. To implement this effectively, you need a delicate balance. It's not about manipulating or playing with someone's feelings, but about creating an authentic dynamic where you're not always in the same emotional state, because, honestly, no one is. Sometimes you're more open and vulnerable, other times more focused on your personal goals. Practical exercise. Make a list of 3 types of messages. Those that show emotional openness, those that demonstrate independence, and those that create curiosity. Alternate between these types in your important conversations. Never use the same type twice in a row. Another crucial aspect of this principle is emotional polarization. Neutral messages are forgettable, but those that evoke strong emotions, positive or negative, are memorable. As Strauss says, "It's better to be loved or hated than ignored." This doesn't mean being unpleasant, but having the courage to express defined opinions instead of trying to please everyone. Repeat this affirmation. "I don't seek universal approval. I seek authentic connections with those who resonate with my true self." When you master this 5th principle, you become someone magnetic. People don't just respond to your messages, they crave receiving the next one. You become a presence that generates intrigue and anticipation. You've stopped being just one more in the crowd to become someone impossible to ignore. Can you feel how these principles can completely transform your way of communicating? You won't just get more responses, you'll create deeper and more authentic connections. Share this video now and activate the bell to receive more strategies that will revolutionize your personal relationships. After exploring these 5 principles, we arrive at a fundamental truth. The truly irresistible message isn't just about clever words or manipulative techniques. It's about becoming a person whose communication reflects authentic inner value. Neil Strauss discovered after years studying seduction. In the end, the best strategy is to develop a life so interesting and fulfilling that your message is naturally attractive because it comes from someone who has something genuine to offer. Messages that always receive responses come from people who have mastered the art of strategic disinterest, who understand the power of perfect timing, who know how to create emotionally resonant content, who build patterns of mutual investment, and who use polarization and variable reinforcement to remain constantly interesting. But beyond techniques, there's a personal transformation. When you stop desperately chasing responses, when you understand that your value doesn't depend on external validation, when you focus on creating an extraordinary life instead of trying to seem interesting in messages, that's when, paradoxically, you become irresistible. The true secret behind the message that always gets a response is that it comes from someone who would be perfectly fine even without that response. That paradox is the core of human attraction. We want what doesn't desperately need us. Your challenge from today is to apply these principles not as external techniques, but as an expression of your personal growth. Start by commenting below. I choose to communicate from power and abundance, not from need and scarcity. Make this public declaration to seal your commitment to this new way of communicating. If this video has opened your eyes to a new dimension of interpersonal communication, make sure to subscribe right now and activate the notification bell. Share this knowledge with someone who needs to improve their communication skills. Sometimes, a simple video can be the catalyst that completely transforms someone's life. Remember, the truly irresistible message isn't just what you say, but who you are when you say it. Develop your best version, and your messages will naturally reflect that value. And when that happens, you won't just receive responses, you'll create authentic connections that can last a lifetime.